Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7. We're at episode number 1732 today. Thank you so much for joining me for it. Thank you so much for subscribing to the show wherever you like to catch it. Thank you also to all the patrons who are making this possible every day with their support at patreon.com/SW7x7. So, the Phantom Menace, it being its 20th anniversary year this year, there's been a lot of questions about what they might do to celebrate it, and we already know, of course, they're having a special 20th anniversary panel. Well, the news is out that there is going to be a limited edition re-release of the Phantom Menace, and it is a special edition release, which means that there are going to be changes, updates, additions to the original Phantom Menace. It's going to come out on May 17th. The actual date it was released was May 19th of 1999. So we're not exactly on the 20th anniversary, but May 19th is a Sunday, so I guess they decided to do it on the Friday instead. There is going to be a limited release. And of course, one of the big questions is, why might Disney be doing this? Because of course, when the original Star Wars movies were re-released as special editions, not only was George Lucas doing it to update the technology and update the way the movie was presented so that it would be more in line with what he had in mind for his vision of it, but it was also to help fund the creation of the prequels at the time. So what might be happening on the Disney side of the house this time? Well, we'll talk about that after the break. But first, I want to talk about what the early word is on some of the updates for the movie. First of all, it seems that a couple of scenes are going to be expanded from scenes that had been previously filmed and deleted, and one of the recurring themes that seems to be going on is tying things into other stories and other media. For example, there was a scene shot where Anakin, young Anakin, gets into a fight with a Rodian who turns out to be Greedo, and Greedo is being a bully and shoving him around and has Anakin by the arm, and the extension of the scene is having Anakin trying to rip violently, just like as much as a little kid could do, like try to rip his way out of Greedo's grasp, but because of the fact that Anakin is Force sensitive and yet doesn't necessarily have great control over it, yanks himself so hard out of Greedo's grasp that he actually dislocates Greedo's right shoulder. And this, I think, is supposed to be meant to be an explanatory for problems with Greedo's shooting later in life that would then explain why he's not necessarily as fast on the trigger as he could be when he meets up with Han in War's Cantina in A New Hope. And then in another explanatory addition, so you might remember that there was another pod racer by the name of Ben Quadraneros who had trouble getting off the starting line along with Anakin, and ultimately Quadraneros' power coupling gave out and his engines all went flying like crazy. Well, in the scene where everybody's arriving in the pod race hangar where, Padme and Shmi and Qui-Gon and Anakin and Jar Jar and 3PO and R2 are all getting into the hangar, there's an extended scene where Jar Jar is poking around, very fascinated by all of the different pod racers, and happens to be at Ben Quadraneros's and does something to fiddle with it, and something breaks and he goes whoop, and then has to kind of sneak away, and thankfully he isn't seen, but this would be the reason why Quadraneros's pod racer ultimately stalled and then busted. Now, another scene that I thought was actually rather short in the original Phantom Menace, and so I'm kind of glad that they're going to do something about this one. The scene where Sidious and Maul are meeting on the balcony, and Sidious tells Maul to go after the Jedi first, and then, handling the girl will be no problem, that scene. So when Maul says, "At last we'll have our revenge," Palpatine, aka Sidious, actually decides to share a parable with Maul at that moment. A parable about Jedi Revan, who eventually became Darth Revan. And this is an Old Republic thing. And it kind of explains in a way, like it's not necessarily the same kind of explanatory that I was sharing with you with those other couple of ones, but the fact that Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, the very popular mobile game, has been very deeply into the Old Republic over the last few months. Like they've been adding Old Republic characters, into the game pretty regularly, and people have been going, why are they doing Old Republic stuff? Especially when Pablo Hidalgo has kind of made it clear that there's not nearly enough people interested in an Old Republic series of movies to ever make anything like that, or even TV series. But this would sort of seem why they might have been doing something like that, cross-pollinating, because there is an extended scene where Palpatine / Sidious tells Maul all about the tale of Revan, who eventually became one of the greatest Sith Lords of the Old Republic. And then, let's see, 2 other scenes for you. One of those hotly debated topics after the release of the Phantom Menace was why there was only one Trade Federation battleship left in orbit around Naboo after the invasion was complete. And, of course, the rationale is, well, they only need one droid control ship, or at least that was the thinking. Well, now they are restoring it to have the same number of battleships. It's dozens of battleships around Naboo. And so this creates a more significant starfight situation. So we get more Naboo starfighters involved. All of the Trade Federation ships end up releasing Vulture droids as well. So there's an even greater swarm of Vulture droids attacking all of these Naboo starfighters. And what ultimately happens is, yes, they are still able to blow up that one Trade Federation battleship, and that kind of strikes fear in the hearts of the commanders of the other battleships, because they've been thinking that these things are indestructible. There's no way that anyone could blow them up. And then when Padme and the rest of her crew capture the Viceroy, they threaten to execute the Viceroy, or at least they threaten to, they're not going to. We know they're not going to, because they're the good guys. But they basically tell them, surrender or the Viceroy is going to get it. And rather than just surrender, they all chicken out and they go off into hyperspace and leave the Viceroy behind. And it's at that point when the rest of the Trade Federation battlecruisers get out of range of control of the battle droids on the surface, because of course there's redundancy in the control systems for these things. So one battleship goes down, they can still keep the droids active. Well, once they're in hyperspace, that's it. Signal's lost, and that's when all the battle droids ultimately stop functioning. And speaking of the battle droids and that particular aspect of the Battle of Naboo, there's an extended fight sequence with Boss Nass. So we don't really get to see Boss Nass, laying down the hammer when he is in the midst of the Battle of Naboo with the rest of the Gungans, but there is an extended sequence where he takes out not only regular battle droids, but actually we get to see super battle droids in the Phantom Menace. They don't just make their debut in Attack of the Clones, they actually show up in the Phantom Menace as well. And Boss Nass has to wade into the fray and ends up taking out super battle droid after super battle droid after super battle droid. And, I can't wait to see the footage of this. I think it's going to be incredibly impressive. Anyway, that is just a glimpse of what the changes are going to be, and I'm sure there are going to be lots more, but as I promised, we're going to talk about the reasons why Disney would be pursuing this line of, a line of promotion, line of marketing for the Phantom Menace and for the 20th anniversary. So we'll talk about that after the break. Stay tuned. This episode is brought to you by Audible. You can get your free trial at sw7x7.com/audible, AUDIBLE. I've been checking out the audiobooks for Star Wars on Audible since the reboot of the canon with A New Dawn by John Jackson Miller. And everyone I've listened to, I've enjoyed the heck out of. And now they're coming out with an audiobook exclusive, Jedi Lost. That's going to debut on April 30th. So the only way you're going to get that is by getting the audio version. So you might as well get a free trial for Audible and get your hands on it. You can go to sw7x7.com/audible, sign up, and when it comes out, you'll be all set. Welcome back. All right, so as far as why Disney might be doing this, well, it is April Fool's Day. So hopefully this one had you scratching your head and wondering whether it was actually possible, but nope, this is utterly an April Fool's thing. There has not been an announced re-release of the Phantom Menace, let alone a special edition version of the Phantom Menace. But if there is, and if they decide to announce that, say, for example, at the 20th anniversary panel at Star Wars Celebration, then you will definitely hear about it here on Star Wars 7x7 as well. But nope, sorry, April Fools. Hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you thought well enough of it that you consider sharing this episode with other friends who might be taken in by the news as well. So please consider doing that too. And that's going to do it for today's episode of the show. Thank you so much for joining me for it as always. And may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
Podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox. It is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other related Star Wars items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2019 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.